So Sacramento's utility company fed cops detailed behavior data without any court orders, consent, or any kind of suspicion. Sacramento Municipal Utilities District, or SMUD, transformed smart meters into government spy devices, transmitting citizens' every electronic impulse to law enforcement databases. Every 15 minutes or so, these meters record life patterns, basically. When people wake up, which appliances run, when showers happen, when homes sit empty even. SMUD handed this fairly intimate surveillance data to Sacramento PD and the Sheriff's County Office and 3 other departments without any kind of warrants. The threshold for suspicion dropped from 7,000 kilowatt hours per month in 2014 to just 2,800 hours by 2023. One SMUD analyst admitted that they personally used 3,500 kilowatts last month above their own suspicion threshold. Running air conditioning in Sacramento's brutal heat basically makes residents criminal suspects. Alfonso Nigan needed extra electricity for medical equipment due to his spinal injuries, and sheriff's deputies showed up twice demanding warrantless entry and threatened arrest when he refused. His actual crime was exercising his Fourth Amendment rights while using his electricity that he was paying for. Brian Decker got the militarization response, deputies with guns drawn and bullhorns blaring, forcing him outside in his underwear while neighbors basically watched. And he was mining cryptocurrency. He wasn't growing cannabis or anything, but SMUD's surveillance didn't distinguish between the legal and the illegal electricity use. California's Public Utility Code, Section 8380, explicitly prohibits utilities from actually sharing precise meter data without warrants or court orders or customer consent. Now, SMUD violated this law daily for a decade, treating statutory protections as suggestions while claiming they're required to, by law, to share the data when they know they're not. The Sacramento Police Department made 90 requests over a 10-year period, each covering entire zip codes. In July of 2023 alone, SMUD sent data on over 10,000 customers. After police filtering, analysts still had 4,800 locations to check for patterns on, finding only 4 homes with suspicious usage. Internal communications actually showed that they lacked probable cause, but decided to continue anyway. And this is something that violates Article 1, Section 13 of the California Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches. And searching entire zip codes without any individual suspicion represents exactly the general warrant our founding fathers actually prohibited. And the city leveraged this surveillance into a revenue machine, levying $94 million in fines in just 2 years under their cannabis ordinance. They monetized constitutional violations at $500 per plant over the 6-plant limit, turning privacy invasion into profit in a way. And the Supreme Court already ruled in Kylio versus United States that thermal imaging of homes requires warrants. That's with stuff like FLIR cameras. Now, Justice Scalia wrote that using technology, quote, not in general public use, end quote, to explore home details that would be unknowable without physical intrusion constitutes a search, which makes sense. Smart meters provide far more invasive data than thermal imaging, for example, ever could. Thermal cameras showed heat patterns, and smart meters revealed daily routines, appliance usage, stuff like occupational consistency and occupancy patterns, and behavioral habits in, 15-minute increments, basically. The Seventh Circuit ruled in Napersville smart meter awareness that the smart meter data collection constitutes a Fourth Amendment search, and the court found that energy consumption data reveals when people are home, when they're asleep, what appliances they use, which, is creating a detailed portrait of their private life by default. And SMUD claims that administrative purposes justify their surveillance. But administrative access definitely does not automatically grant lawful authority or allow them to become law enforcement's data broker at will. The Naperville court explicitly stated that law enforcement's access requires a warrant, even if administrative collection doesn't. So smart meters generate what the Naperville court called data at least as rich as thermal imaging. In Kyleo, law enforcement can determine grow light usage with confidence, basically, much more confidence than thermal cameras can actually do by analyzing consumption patterns and stuff like timing. And SMUD's privacy policy really hides in the website footer with no real mechanism for consumers to refuse that surveillance. Citizens can't really opt out of this electricity service, making this forced participation in government surveillance infrastructure. And the evidence shows SMUD's proclivity to generate lists and tips for law enforcement rather than responding to actual specific investigations. They transformed from a utility provider into an active surveillance contractor mining their own customers' data for the police. And every smart meter that is actually installed is like a, private government informant that documents that home's activities. And the data gets stored for years, creating behavioral profiles that law enforcement can then access with no judicial oversight. And other jurisdictions watch this case very closely, waiting, to try to implement similar surveillance partnerships if this whole SMUD thing actually prevails. Local utilities nationwide become the next government spy networks, turning infrastructure against citizens. The very bills you pay are being used against you. The October 2025 hearing will determine whether courts protect constitutional privacy or legitimize utility surveillance. And the, precedent really affects every American with a smart meter. Essentially, everyone in urban and suburban areas will definitely be affected. SMUD pretends that their data sharing qualifies for, this narrow statutory exemption, but like mass zip code searches do not meet any legal exception whatsoever. They claim law enforcement's request trigger mandatory compliance with ignoring the law's warrant requirements, which means it's not a request. Like, they're just giving them access to everything. Smart meters promise efficiency in grid management. Instead, they create what the EFF calls a dragnet surveillance grid. And it's one that you fund and you pay for. So, like, indiscriminate monitoring of the entire community without any suspicion or cause is completely unacceptable. And the city of Sacramento and the police department refuse to comment or, accept any responsibility. They hide behind litigation while continuing their surveillance, which is really just standard authoritarianism. You violate rights first and you litigate later. Now, we started at 7,000 kilowatt hour monitoring for actual grow operations, which, shouldn't even be a thing, really. It's your electricity. You pay for it. Who the hell is anyone to tell you how much, you can have? It's nonsense. But then we moved, to like more than half that. Drug enforcement becomes basically mass behavioral monitoring of law-abiding citizens. Deputies arrive with predetermined guilt, determining, warrantless entry based on an algorithmic flag. And when citizens exercise constitutional rights by refusing, which they're absolutely entitled to, they faced arrest threats and intimidation. Proving surveillance creates the presumption of criminality. Smart meters collect granular usage, revealing intimate details, basically, that the Supreme Court protects as a core Fourth Amendment issue, or in that territory. In the sanctuary of the home, the court ruled that all details are intimate details deserving protection. SMUD and analysts conduct painstaking analysis of customer accounts, profiling behavior through patterns from energy data. And they become intelligence analysts rather than utility workers, mining data for government purposes. French regulators already sanctioned smart meter providers for collecting granular consumption data without valid consent. Europe recognizes to some degree the privacy invasion, while American utilities just plead ignorance, basically. And the lawsuit seeks permanent injunctions to actually stop SMUD surveillance and prevent, these local cops, not that like anyone else is warranted in doing it, but from actually requesting bulk data without warrants. It's a really simple demand. Like, follow the existing law. Respect the Constitution, the one you guys swore an oath to uphold and defend. Stop spying on customers, right? Like, smart meters enable what thermal imaging attempted to do, peering into homes without that actual physical intrusion. And they could do it remotely too. Technology completely changed, but the Fourth Amendment protections really do still remain. And, the government needs warrants to actually surveil homes. Property owners face like six-figure fines based on tenant activity that they actually can't monitor. Electricity bills stay in tenants' names, and the city collects less than $6 million of the $94 million assessed because over 80% challenged the actual penalties. SMUD transformed public infrastructure into a complete authoritarian surveillance state, providing government partnerships with basically corrupt institutions. They chose this kind of mass monitoring over customer privacy and police cooperation over what should be legal compliance. And October's decision that's coming up, whether utilities remain service providers or become surveillance platforms, is really important. The choice definitely defines whether the smart infrastructure serves citizens or spies on them at the end of the day. And it's something that I think we should all be aware of and beware of. I'll see you in the next video.